death, taxes, and the Toronto Maple Leafs getting bounced in the first round of the NHL playoffs. These, my friends, are life's inevitabilities. For the 6th year in a row, the long-suffering Leafs were eliminated in the first round of the postseason, this time at the hands of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who outlasted Toronto in a tight 7-game series and are gunning hard for a 3rd straight Stanley Cup. As for the Leafs, whose infamous Stanley Cup drought stretches back to 1967, they're headed to the golf course, having met their customary fate despite setting franchise records this season for wins and points. They've now gone nearly 2 decades without winning a playoff series, in fact. And no team has ever felt misery quite like what the Leafs are currently going through. We'll explain. Sit back, relax, and take this in. Before we dive into today's episode, a friendly reminder to smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're so close to 100,000 subs, and we want you to help us get there. Alright, now back to the show. Let's get one thing straight off the top. Unlike in previous years, the Leafs didn't blow this one per se. They hung tough against an exceedingly tough opponent and didn't get outplayed in any objective way against the Lightning. In fact, the Leafs actually had the edge in shot attempts, shots on goal, expected goals, and actual goals. Yeah, they outscored Tampa for the series. Obviously, that's no consolation for Leafs fans, who have now watched their team's playoff woes reach unprecedented depths. With their most recent defeat, the Leafs are now the first team in NHL, MLB, or NBA history to lose a winner-take-all game in the first round of the playoffs in 5 consecutive seasons. That's not just unprecedented. It's almost impossible. The probability of the Leafs playing in 5 straight first-round series that went the distance and losing the decisive game each time? 0.0036%. Or roughly a 1 in 28,000 chance, according to hockey analytics guru Jay Fresh. That stings. And it especially hurts when you consider how many times during that stretch the Leafs were the better team in the series. Like, for instance, when they collapsed in the first round last year against the lowly Montreal Canadiens, a clearly inferior opponent. After finishing in first place in the North Division in the COVID-shortened 2020-2021 campaign, the Leafs stormed out to a 3-1 series lead against Montreal and looked poised to exercise their first-round demons against their most hated rival. Except, Toronto Stars disappeared after Game 4, and Montreal clawed their way back, evening the best of 7 at 3 games apiece before downing the Maple Leafs 3-1 in Game 7 in Toronto. The Canadiens improbably ended up making it all the way to the Stanley Cup final, while the Leafs, who were coming off their best season ever by points percentage, headed home with their tails between their legs. Of course, that collapse followed a completely brutal early exit the year prior, when the Leafs' mighty offense, 3rd best in the NHL that year, got quieted by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Over the course of their best-of-5 qualifying round, the Leafs got shut out twice in the series opener and the decisive Game 5, and mustered a total of 10 goals en route to another humbling defeat. The Blue Jackets, it should be noted, only made it into the postseason that year because the league had expanded its playoff pool, and Columbus took only 1 game off the Lightning, the eventual champs, in the following round. As you can see, the Leafs have plenty of experience losing to lesser teams in the first round. But they're also quite capable of squandering series leads against good teams, like they did in 2019 against the Boston Bruins, Toronto's postseason Boogeyman. That year, the Leafs looked poised all season long to begin a glorious new chapter in franchise history after so many decades of frustration. John Tavares dazzled in his first season in Toronto, putting up a career-best 88 points, and with JT taking some of the pressure off young stars like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, Toronto seemed primed to break through. And sure enough, in their first-round battle with Boston, the Leafs looked resolute, hanging tough and eventually grabbing a 3-2 series lead with a hard-fought 2-1 victory in Game 5. With the series headed back to Toronto for Game 6, the Leafs had a golden opportunity to clinch the series on home ice. But you know how this movie ends. The Leafs ended up frittering away Game 6, going down 3-1 midway through the second and ultimately losing 4-2, before getting absolutely walloped in Game 7 back in Boston. They dropped the series decider by a score of 5-1, and roughly 7 months later, Mike Babcock, the once venerated head coach who was supposed to drag Toronto back to prominence, got fired. Still, as painful as all those defeats were, none of them hold a candle to the horror show that was the 2013 postseason. Any mention of that first round series against Boston still sends shivers down the spines of Leafs fans everywhere. That year, the Leafs returned to the playoffs for the first time in nearly a decade, with Phil Kessel, Nazem Kadri, and Dion Phaneuf leading the charge in the lockout-shortened campaign. They weren't expected to beat Boston in their first round matchup, but they were expected to compete. And compete they did. After going down 3-1 in the best of 7, the Leafs scratched and clawed and somehow managed to force a Game 7, where all bets were off. And in the hostile environs of TD Garden, the Leafs were unfazed, taking a 4-1 lead in the third and seemingly punching their ticket into the second round. Except, cue the implosion. The Leafs just couldn't fend off Boston's late surge, and their lead shrank to 2, then 1, and then eventually 0 with less than a minute to go in regulation. Naturally, the Bruins took it in overtime, breaking the hearts of Leafs fans everywhere who would have to wait until 2017 to see their team back in the postseason. Well, since that 2017 breakthrough, the Leafs have made the playoffs every year, and have made it past the first round 0 times. Pretty rough, right? And don't forget, the Leafs endured a whole lot of postseason disappointment before this current run of first-round futility. Like, for example, in '93, when a Toronto juggernaut, led by Doug Gilmour and Dave Andreychuk, blew a 3-2 series lead after Wayne Gretzky famously got away with a high stick on Gilmour in Game 6. Or the following year, when the heavily favored Leafs lost again in the conference finals to the barely .500 Vancouver Canucks. Or in 2002, when the second-seeded Maple Leafs, anchored by franchise legends Matt Sundin and Curtis Joseph, fell in 6 games to the Midland Carolina Hurricanes in the conference finals yet again. Look, everyone knows that the Leafs haven't won the Cup since 1967, when the league featured all of 6 teams, but it's also worth pointing out that they haven't played for the Cup since 1967 either. This franchise continues to be defined by playoff failure, which brings us back to the current club, fresh off their first round loss to Tampa and suddenly wrestling with the same question they were asking themselves last offseason. What now? Do they blow it up? Run it back? New GM? New head coach? We'll find out soon enough. Regardless though, for at least one more year, the Leafs will hang on to their well-deserved reputation as playoff chokers.